let's talk about the symptoms of your shadow, how to actually be able to recognize when your shadow is arising. So, as a general rule, most people have been conditioned to focus so far away from their inner world or inner reality that we often only encounter our shadows and thus our inner world through psychological distress. And while this is sort of hard to hear and painful to recognize in a way that often we're so out of touch with our inner worlds, we can use these moments of psychological distress as a gift now that we have these tools. So you can think of psychological distress as basically entry points into your shadow and thus entry points into really deep and powerful self-awareness. So one of the first symptoms that you will see that's letting you know that your shadow is being activated is whenever you have a charged judgment or a projection. So when you are judging somebody for something they did, this is a symptom of your own shadow, and we'll find out how this is really working in a little bit. The next thing is whenever we are carrying long-standing resentment or struggling with forgiveness towards somebody. Again, another really profound symptom of our own shadow not being integrated and a lack of wholeness that exists somewhere within ourselves. And the third major symptom we're going to talk about is infatuation. Whenever we have somebody on a pedestal, this is usually a symptom of positively repressed traits that exist within your shadow that you're pushing down into your own subconscious. And we'll go through what that means and what to do with that. And the fourth major symptom we're going to discuss is self-loathing or self-judgment. Remember what we said, the more dense the shadow is, the more of a correlation there is with low self-esteem and a lack of self-love. Because again, you can think of these rejected parts of yourself as these exiled, children essentially cut off from the whole of your personality. And it's our job to go find these parts and bring them back in. So when we talk about charged judgment and projection, okay, the qualities we fear existing in ourselves are usually the exact qualities that we dislike in other people. So this means that a triggered judgment about somebody else is a representation of a lack of wholeness and integration within us. So this is a projection onto someone else, essentially, of what we are repressing within ourselves. The more intense a reaction is, the more activated or charged or frustrated we are at or about somebody else, usually the denser, the more intense our shadow self is in that specific area. And so what we want to be able to do is start labeling the trait we are judging when we are triggered and look for it in ourselves. And again, I'm going to take you through a process for how to do this. But an example you can think of is if you see somebody who's expressing arrogance and it really, really activates you, it really triggers you, you have to look, okay, what is this showing me about myself? And there's a very specific way of looking at this. It's usually something that it's a way you are acting in relationship to yourself. It's something that you haven't made peace with. It's still lingering from your childhood, or it can be a trait that you act or project onto other people, or a way that you judge this individual that you're triggered by. So we're really going to go into that in a little bit, and we're going to flesh out a whole bunch of different examples so you can really see, and I'm going to give you some tools for using this for deep integration purposes. So another symptom is, as we discussed, dislike or resentment towards a person. When we overall don't like a person, or it's really the qualities essentially that we don't like within someone. And there are often when it's like a person we're judging overall, like, oh, I really don't like that human being, or I don't like your friend or this person's partner. The traits we are judging in them, there's usually a list. So instead of it being one specific occasion where there's a charged judgment about one specific thing in a person that's actually representing your shadow, usually when there's a person we don't like overall, it just means that there's multiple qualities within them that are representing multiple parts of our own shadow. So there's usually a lot more integration work to do within ourselves when there's something we don't like about a person where there's multiple pieces, if that makes sense. It's a more dense shadow. When we infatuate with somebody, okay, when we project onto others what we are unwilling or unable to recognize in ourselves and put this person on a pedestal as a result, it's a symptom of disowned traits. And this is actually a phenomenal breakup tool, because if you find yourself like infatuated with a person and you have them on a pedestal, what that tells you is that the things you're admiring in that person, and you're like, wow, this person's so amazing, you're actually not recognizing where you have those traits available to yourself as well, and you're not using them, and you're not capitalizing on them completely. And so when we infatuate, it's actually a beautiful opportunity to use something called golden shadow work, where we are able to start recognizing we have access to those traits as well. And in fact, we're often expressing those traits as well and not recognizing them or not giving ourselves the credit, because we don't see that our traits just exist within different forms. And a simple example of this is you might see somebody who's so smart at math and be like, wow, they're so smart, look at them, they're so amazing. And maybe you're not recognizing how smart you are with people, or with human behavior, or with your social skills, or with your creativity or your art, or and so you are diminishing yourself because you're not integrating those traits and fully seeing yourself wholly from that holistic perspective. And lastly, when we talk about the self-loathing or self-judgment as another symptom of our shadow, when we have self-loathing or a lot of self-judgment, this just means you have many repressed traits. So not only do you probably have a lot of positive traits that you're not recognizing and integrating and believing about yourself, but you probably also have a lot of things that you were taught were bad, or you think are bad or negative or unworthy of love within yourself, and you're trying to hide them and avoid shame and push them down. And so there's this deep layer of inner rejection happening at basically a pre-conscious level, sort of between your conscious personality and your subconscious self. And of course, if we are exiling parts of ourselves, that's going to lead to not feeling so good about ourselves. So in the next modules, we are going to go through some really deep examples for how to use shadow work, different processes, so you can begin your integration and healing process.